everyone, and welcome to our annual Best Books of the Year podcast. And once again, I'm joined by Publishing Scotland's Vikki Reilly. Hello, Vikki.
Hello.
Some people put up their trees, some people have advent calendars, but for me, I know Christmas is coming when you and I talk about the best books of the last 12 months. So
That's the same with me too.
absolutely. So we will do this as ever, drink in hand.
Yes, I've got my bourbon smash,
Bourbon
blackberry
smash,
bourbon
cheers.
smash.
I've got my usual glass of red. So yeah, in previous years, these have got longer and a bit more less structured. So we thought, let's try and rein it back a bit, try and do it in one take rather than over 2 or 3 podcasts. So we're going for 15 books of the year to talk about each. And I realize that's still 30 books to talk about, so it will go on for a while. But we're going to see how that works and take it from there.
Good
So without
plan.
further ado, Vikki, what's your first choice of book from last week
So
to talk about?
my first choice of book that I'm going to talk about is the first book that I read in 2024. I thought, why not start at the beginning?
Yep.
And that is Slumboy by Juano Diaz. It's a memoir. And an absolutely brilliant memoir as well. It's his first book. Guano. He's better known as a visual artist. He's a painter. He does these most amazing portraits. So I would like have a wee Google and have a look at his portraits. He's done portraits of like the great and the good, including Grace Jones and Madonna and all that kind of thing. He's had really quite a successful career, but his this is a memoir of his childhood,
Mhm.
which to use the word humble is not to do it justice. So I mean, on the front, it's got a quote from Lem Sissy that says, "If you like Shuggy Bain, this is the book for you." And it is quite in the same vein. It's definitely in Shuggy Bain territory. Juano was born to an alcoholic mother and ended up in care and then ended up being adopted by a traveling family.
Mhm.
And so this book takes you from his childhood up to the moment that he sort of strode out into the world to sort of, you know, start living. And like, so it's just really his childhood. The subject matter, it is very grim at times because his experience in the care home was not good. The stuff with his mother is quite hard hitting to read a lot of the time. And even the stuff with his adopted family can be quite hard hitting too, because he felt loved absolutely in as the traveling family that he was adopted into, but it was a very the sort of head of the household, his dad was a very masculine character. He ran a scrapyard, he ran a boxing gym, and he very much wanted Wano to follow in his footsteps in that way, and he did.
Mhm.
He did do the boxing and he did work in the scrapyard, but he hated it because it's not who he was. He was a sensitive artist. He was gay. He wanted to dress up and paint portraits and do all the things that really were frowned upon by his family, particularly his mum as well, because she was quite uh, very, oh, what will the neighbours think about anything remotely sort of scandalous and all that kind of thing. So it does have a strand of tragedy all the way through it and perseverance and all that kind of thing. But all the way through it too is the love of art and how that absolutely just guided him throughout his life and gave him something to keep going for
Mhm.
in all those difficult times. It's got some great characters. The nun, even though he had a terrible, terrible time in the care home, I mean, it's just awful. Like just things like he didn't get given the right pair of shoes, the right size of shoes until like, he was in there for like about 18 months or something. And his feet were permanently affected by the fact that he wore shoes that were too small for him. But there was this nun in the home and she very much mentored him and sort of took care of him as well. So there's a lot of really touching moments and it's brilliantly written as well. I can't believe it's a first book because he tells it in a very novelistic way.
Right.
So the language at the beginning is very naive, it's very childlike, and but as he gets older, the language just keeps subtly changing into more sophisticated language as he grows older as well. It's just really, really well done, and you should all read it. The paperback's coming out next year.
Fantastic. Well, I'll start with one of the first books, probably the first book I read this year, certainly the first one that I kind of reviewed.
Sorry,
Oh,
before you do, can I just cheat and say, and also if you read that one, I also read Outland by Jenny Fagan, very similar territory, and that is amazing too. So I thought I would cheat there and get two books.
right, okay, now you can't do that
Why not?
because we'll be here. So, are you trying to tell me you've actually picked 30 books?
No.
Okay. Um,
Carry on, you carry on.
I have to say, I'm actually reading Outland at the moment, and I think if I'd finished it, it probably would have
Oh my God.
made my list as well. It's heartbreaking, but
Absolutely.
I mean, what a great writer. Um, right, so AJ Close, What Doesn't Kill Us is the one that I'm going to kick off with. I spoke to AJ about it for this very podcast, and set as the 70s move into the 80s, very much based on the investigation into the Yorkshire Ripper crimes in Yorkshire at the time, rather than the crimes itself. It's about the kind of failure of the investigation and the effect it had on people who are in that part of the world as well at that time, which included AJ Close herself. It looks it looks at class and race and a lot of the big topics like that, but it's also really funny in places, very honest in places, very even-handed. It doesn't hit you over the head with any big moral lessons. You've got to work things out for yourself. There's this feminist community who are living in one house, but within that community, there's lots of schisms and
Power struggles.
incredible power struggles going on as well. And it's a really vivid evocation of the time and place, and also of the attitudes. I mean, some of the
Oh my
attitudes now,
God.
when we look back, you think, oh God, thank God that time's passed. And then, of course, you see Greg Wallace. No, perhaps not. But there's a lot of that stuff, the kind of casual, what people would think of as kind of casual misogyny and a bias, which actually,
Yeah.
there's nothing casual about it.
I
But
mean,
it's a fantastic book. It's a real one. It's one, and it just won
the
the Salter
Saltire, yeah. Uh-huh.
for best novel of the year. Is that right?
Best fiction. Yeah. I mean, when I read it, I was amazed at how much of it still resonated with my own
Yeah,
experiences in the
sure.
90s, even in the
Yeah.
2000s. It's madness.
Yeah, absolutely. More things change, the more they often stay the same.
Yeah,
It's a great example of that. It's a fabulous book, and
really well done.
it really kicked off my literary year in style. What's your second choice or third choice, depending on what we're saying?
What will I go for? I'll go for this one. I'll go for Only Here, Only Now by Tom Newland. Now, I did an event with Juano and Tom and Margaret MacDonald, who wrote Glasgow Boys as well. We'll probably talk about that a little later on.
Talk about
But
it.
this book, I picked this one because it was just another fantastic novel. It's with an amazingly brilliant main character called Cora Mowat. She's like a teenage girl. She has undiagnosed ADHD, and so she's getting into trouble a lot because, as she herself says, like she's got like a fizzy brain, and it makes her say and do things that she doesn't quite expect, like that she doesn't quite plan to do, and so she's a little bit all over the place. But she's also You know, and the teenage girl voice is absolutely spot on. Like that mixture uh of thinking that you know yourself and you know what you're about, and like that sort of bolshiness, like totally mixed with being so insecure and so unsure of yourself and all that kind of thing. Now, like Slumboy, like bad things happen in this book, but the characters, or the character of Cora and other supporting characters, just really, like, it doesn't feel like a tragic book when you're reading it at all, even though there is some really shocking moments in it. And she ends up in Glasgow because she comes from a small town in Fife, and she thinks that Glasgow's like Mecca. That's like the place that she wants to get to. And once she gets there, she finds that it's not quite the Mecca that she thought it was going to be, because she ends up in this really dodgy like cupboard. It's like she practically lives in a cupboard, and she ends up getting money from a babysitting gig for this middle class family. So there's a lot about class in there as well. And she's just a brilliant character, and I really, really would like to see this made into a TV show, because I think everybody would fall in love with her.
Well, you mentioned Margaret MacDonald's Glasgow Boys, so trying to make this run so smoothly
Seamless.
together. That's what I'm going to talk about next. And it's the novel East Bride has been kind of waiting for. That's actually, even though it's called Glasgow Boys, a lot of it's set in East Bride, which I know very well. In fact, parts of it you go, oh wow, yeah, I can't believe it. I'm so there's a great thing when that happens. Again, character-driven. Finlay and Banjo, the two central
Oh,
characters, amazing. And it's about true friendship and how sometimes it comes along when you need it most. It is, again, a coming of age novel, and very, very difficult at times. You know, there's themes of abuse and institutional issues as well. But there's also the possibility and hope, the fantastic hope, and in relationships as well, not just with each other, but then with other people too.
yeah.
Um, it says the term tenderness. I know Andrew Hagen says tenderness itself, but it's an incredibly tender novel in all sorts of ways, you know, because you can feel that at that age in particular, you're almost alive. Your nerve endings are, you know, on edge because just you feel too much
Yeah.
often. And that's the thing. These boys feel too much. And often that's tried to be kind of knocked out them, if nothing else. And life is really trying to do that. But it it puts, whereas sometimes with AJ Close, what doesn't kill you, you kind of shake your head at the humanity and when it's available, what it's possible. With this, it kind of restores your faith in
Oh,
humanity.
absolutely. Yeah.
It's certainly one of the debuts of the year, and it's one of my books of the year. I think Margaret MacDonald's written something very, very special. And I interviewed her for Snack Magazine, and she said that, you know, she's been with these boys for a long, long time in various forms over the years. And this is just the kind of one that's made it to publication. And I'm so
Yeah.
glad it has been. It's a wonderful book.
I know, there's that sort of saying that people say that, you can't make good art about good people. And well, I mean, of course it's nonsense. But that book is a complete like example of how it can be, good people doing good things. And yeah, it's a brilliant novel.
Yeah, it really is. A really emotional novel. I didn't know what to expect
Yeah.
when I started reading it. And of course, if you're older, it will take you back to those years.
Well, yeah, it's set in the 90s, isn't it?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
not just that, your own kind of teen years and growing up and all of that. You might not have had their experiences.
Yeah.
You haven't, because they're can be really tough ones. But the situations and the relationships and the way that you feel at school and the way you might feel be slighted and the things that you wish you'd said and done, it's
Yeah.
absolutely there. It's beautifully written, really is. What's next from you?
Oh, I am going to go classic now.
Good.
And I am
Oh
going
yeah.
to talk about Dorothy Dunnett, The Game of Kings, which is the first book in her Lemon series of books. Now my boss Marion, what just kept banging on about how brilliant Dorothy Dunnett was.
She did it to me when we met her at an event. That was one of the first things she said. Have you read any Dorothy Donnett? I'm like, well, not for a long time.
It's so funny. And so I cracked, and I'm glad I did, because this is an astounding book. Um, and I think, Dorothy Dunnett was always an author that I just kind of dismissed. Maybe because I remember the old covers from when I was a bookseller, like, like back in the day, and they just looked a bit wifey-ish, which I know is a
Right.
terrible thing to say, but but so I think she's been hard done by her covers in the past, because this is dark, this is adventurous, this is proper psychological study of people and family and power and all that kind of stuff. It's so good. Again, I keep talking about television, but this would make an amazing prestige TV um series, with big budgets flung at it.
Yeah.
Because the
That might be the problem. Big budgets might be the problem these days. But
Netflix or
uh,
Apple or somebody somewhere like that, Succession, so, like the same kind of, because Lemond he was born in an aristocratic family, but he's gone rogue, and he's a sort of mercenary type now, and he's on the run, and everybody's whispering about him, but he ends up coming back to Scotland and causing havoc. And particularly the relationship between him and his brother, who stayed in Scotland and did the right thing by, taking care of the family estate and all that kind of stuff. It's their connection, the mother of the two sons, who you think she's playing them off against each other, but there's wisdom there. And okay, it's just really, really brilliant. It's a dense read though, like you won't fly through it, because the language is really rich. There's Latin in there, there's French in there, there's Scots in there, there's everything in there. So it's a book to luxuriate in.
it's a name that kind of gets mentioned on the outskirts when people talk about Scottish literature all too often.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Dorothy Dunnett. I know I've heard about her, but probably haven't read her. So it's really interesting to hear that take. And it's a writer, especially after Marion kind of saying, you must read this, that I will have to kind of read at some point. Well, talking about classics, going for a reissue that came out this year, if that's what you call it. The Dear Archie Hines, The Dear Green Place got a new
Yeah.
edition, a welcome new edition. And for those that don't know, Archie Hind, basically his only novel. I mean, I know there's First Aid, but this was the one that we knew. And it's got an introduction by Alistair Gray, who was a great friend of the Hinds family, Archie Hind. I was very lucky to be at a kind of celebration stroke launch night in Glasgow for the book, and it was full of Archie's friends and family, and and they had footage of him himself talking, the kind of found footage from a film about Alistair, but there was an interview with Archie on it. For anyone who hasn't read it, it's an absolute Scottish classic.
Yeah.
One of the things I would say about this year is there's been some great Glasgow novels,
Mm.
really great Glasgow novels, perhaps brought into focus with Poor Things in the film at the beginning of the
Yeah.
year, and people kind of rediscovering Poor Things. But this stands along with the very, very best. It's got a kind of opening where it takes you down the River Clyde from the outskirts into the city, very kind of cinematic, very kind of panoramic. And it's a beautiful piece of writing. And it's all about the realities of wanting to be a writer, a bit similar to your first choice, the realities of wanting to be a writer and having to pay the bills and be a father and be a family man and all of those things. And that was the kind of bind that Archie had in real life, and that Matt Craig, who's the central character, has in the book. Honestly, if you've never read The Dear Green Place, you are in for such a treat. It's a brilliant, brilliant book.
I know, and that edition has sold really well as well. Like, it was Waterstones Book of the Month
Yeah.
each year. And I was in the Glasgow Waterstones last month, and still had its own table. So
Yeah,
it just
brilliant.
shows you the power of readers giving it a refreshing cover and putting it out there again.
And one of the stories that came out of the launch night was they were going through, his family were going through Archie's things, as they were kind of getting, these things have to happen, more of which later on. And they discovered the typed manuscript of The Dear Green Place, the original.
Oh,
And it's now
wow.
going to be held by Eleanor Bell and our team at Strathclyde University are going to have the kind of collection of Archie Hind memorabilia. That's going to be
Oh, that's
stored and kept
brilliant.
there, and people will be able to go and see it and study it and all of those things at Strathclyde University. So yeah, a fantastic book.
Was it a special anniversary or anything?
Uh, now you're talking. You're asking me questions I don't know the answer
Sorry.
to. I don't know if it could be.
Yeah, yeah, it's like it kind of just came back again out of nowhere, and I was like, oh, right, okay.
Yeah. Well, you talk about your next one while I just have a wee look at this and see if I can tell you.
Okay, doke. I actually have not got any more Glasgow books, so I can't carry on the Glasgow strand. So what I'll do is I'll talk about Lost People, which
Right.
is actually more of a novella than a novel.
Okay.
But
That's fine.
it's really, but it really packs a punch. It's by Margaret Elphinstone, who's not written a novel in years and years and years and years.
Another name I haven't heard about for a long time.
Yeah, in fact, she thought to herself that she had retired from novel writing and that she was never going to write another story again. But then this story just, it came to her and she couldn't not write it. I mean, it's published by a really tiny, tiny press called Wild Goose, which is a member, but they mostly specialise in Christian books and all that because they're based on Iona.
Right.
But this is a lovely novella. It's sort of, I mean, you can call it dystopian because it's set in a future world where something has really drastically gone wrong. And the main character, who's never named, you don't know who they are, um, they're a child at the beginning of the novel, and they come upon this commune, and so he stays in. I say I mean they. As you say, like there's no notion of who this person is, um, and so they stay in this commune, and they have a particular affinity with the garden.
Right.
So, and so it's like a character study of this person who, once they grow up, then they go off on a sort of walk among the land to sort of try and find their path. But actually, they come to realize that the garden is where they should be. And there's a dog on the cover, and the dog plays a big part in the novel as well because um the person has this dog who they find um like stranded somewhere, and it's just about reconnecting to people and place and the world itself after obviously they'd gone through a massive trauma. And it's so hopeful and lovely and wise, and it's just a really great read. And it was shortlisted for the fiction awards too, which I really was pleased to see because it kind of went a bit unheralded when
Yeah.
it came out, even though it's got brilliant cover quotes from like James Robertson, Kathleen Jamie, Mandy Haggith, like loads of folk. So and it's really worth reading.
That's one I would like to read because I looked at that list and that was one I went, oh, I didn't realize that that was out. And from such a great writer as well, one that we
It'll
have.
not take you long because it's
Yeah.
honestly it's tiny as well, but it packs a
Well,
punch.
a book which kind of surprised me in terms of its content rather than its style, I would say, is Genevieve Jagger's Fragile Animals, published by 404 Out. You're laughing anyway. So it's a kind of vampire novel set on Rothsay on the Isle of Bute. I mean, who would have thought that that would have happened? But it is. It's classic Scottish Gothic with such a twist. You've got the kind of dark, mysterious stranger, as you might in the classic vampire mythology, but they kind of meet in a B&B just outside of Rothsay, I think, and they discover the delights of that island. By the way, I love Rothsay. That's one of my favourite
I'm not
places.
sure if I've been there. I don't think I
Oh, you
have.
got to check out the toilets. They're amazing. the public toilets in the Rothsay, saved by Prince Charles or King Charles as the thing.
Is that right?
Uh,
God,
but
they must
and
be
of
worth
course,
checking out
it's
then.
of course the hometown of the Zavaronis, and
Is that right? It's what I see. I never
oh,
knew
they'll
that.
go into the chippy, have a Zavaroni chip shop still there. That's I'm not here to do the Rothsay tourist board, but this is such again kind of that move, a little bit like Glasgow Boys, but entirely different. But that move from childhood to adulthood and learning that things you thought of are perhaps certainties are not, and perhaps the lies you've been told by the people that you're supposed to trust. Really vivid characters as well. There's religion in it. There is a really strong sensuality and sexuality in it. It's someone discovering themselves and what a journey that is of discovery. Noel travels from Edinburgh to the Isle of Bute. That in itself is the journey and a half. But it's yeah, it makes you worry for her, but then you think, no, there's a strength there. She's going to be all right. And it then makes you worry for other people. It's kind of quite a mix that way, you know. I like that. I like that kind of mixture of vulnerability and strength bordering on, you know, uh,
Psychopathy.
I was trying to avoid that word. It's not, but you know, that kind of, not violence even, but just in true Gothic style, you think,
Yeah.
oh, this is not going to be a good thing. All these things are not going to go well. And yeah, and animals may be hurt in this book as too.
Oh dear.
But yeah, it's a wonderful book. It's called Fragile Animals by Genevieve Jagger, published by 404 Inc. and who are another great year. But yeah, again, I love it when you get a book where you really don't know what to expect and it goes, wow, I did not expect that. Great example of that.
Well, talking about animals getting harmed, I'm going to then see we're so good at this. I'm going to talk about Anna. Oh, see, this is a proof, so you can't really see.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
Eva, Anna, Ada. I'm glad I didn't get all the names mixed up because I Eva, Anna, Ada.
It's a brilliant book. And actually, I read, did that come out this year? Or maybe I read it
Yeah, I
last
think
year.
that was. I
Okay.
think it was maybe January, February time.
Okay.
I think.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you might have. Oh yeah, it's got the publication date on the back is the 18th of January.
So it did sneak in. Oh, well, I would have had that because I think it's a brilliant book.
Oh my
Absolutely
God.
brilliant book. Yeah.
Yeah, like at the time when I do my wee Instagram reviews of this book, and at the time when I posted this one up, I described it, and Ali Miller herself commented underneath it how amazed how she loved it was because I described it as David Lynch without any whimsy whatsoever. Because it is that sort of very dreamlike world, that sort of like sort of bordering on, well, it is actually, it's nightmarish world because there is
Yeah.
no, when David Lynch, Twin Peaks or whatever, you might get a little sort of whimsical bit here and there, but you
I'm
get,
rewatching Twin Peaks at the moment, and
oh yeah,
you do. So I'd kind of forgotten uh, just how much whimsy that there is in it. Yeah.
yeah, where there is none of that in here. Everybody is so disconnected and
But there is dark humor in it as
oh
well.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Really,
total
you know,
dark
like
humor.
the relationship between of the main girl and the husband, and then
Oh my
the
God.
partner. Oh dear, oh dear.
Um, but it just like it's a sort of dystopian world. Again, it's sort of set in a future where the world's probably going to come to an end at some point because they keep mentioning this thing called the wave, which
Yeah.
is going to be a catastrophic event. And it's the way that they all have to get points and things on this app and or these it's sort of a social media type app thing. And the mum is a sort of bit of a sort of influencer star, but the
Mm.
version that she presents and the version that she is of who she is are so different. Um, it is a bit because she's gone through the heartbreak of losing a child, and Ava or Anna, I see I'm going to get mixed up. Ada, she's a young person who's clearly not had a great childhood, and so they sort of connect strangely through this this sort of shared disturbingness, if you want to call it that. And there is violence and strange goings on, and so it feels like they aren't quite connected to themselves either in mind or in body, but at the same time they have their schemes and plans, and even though, the Ada does hope for escape, so there is that, but I mean, it's bizarre and it's brilliant, and even though it's horrific, it's absolutely compelling as well.
It really is. I'm glad you brought that up, that that was this year, because as I said, I think I read it to review at the
Yeah,
end of last year with that in mind, which I did. Because I'm going to be posting, I think, fairly soon on Scottish Way's 10 favourite books of fiction of the year, and that's now on that list, basically. I'm going to have to include it. That's brilliant.
but I'm glad I reminded you.
Absolutely, yeah. So something that was, again, we've talked quite a bit about kind of coming of age novels and that time, and one of the most beautifully written, and one that genuinely at times had me eh, in tears, and at other times literally punching the air in delight, was Andreas N. Orderica's How We Named the Stars. Yeah, so this is about Daniel Della Luna, who goes to college and falls in love basically with someone who from the outside looks to be it's his roommate, big jock kind of guy. You might think completely different to him, but they both fall in love, and it's absolutely gorgeous and tender. And it's not, I mean, when I spoke to Andreas about this, I was thinking, oh, we can't give away the twist, but he says, no, it's right in the opening. It's right at the beginning that a terrible, and even now I'm kind of going, I don't really want to tell you without reading it, but something terrible happens, because it's the most emotional deconstruction of grief that I think I've read in a long, long time. And the second section, if you like, the Mexican section, when Daniel goes back home and learns lots of things about his family, and is so painful. So, physically painful almost to read it, I found. Um, so you go from these great, great highs where you're like, oh yes, and happiness is there within your reach, to just the depths of despair. All written, I knew Andreas as a poet before
Mm.
this is his first novel. And he's got that poet sensibility. He gets feeling. He knows how to capture a sense of feeling, and also captures sensational things. And what I mean by that is
Of the senses.
off the senses,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, color and feeling and all of those things. He uses all these things to really heighten your senses as you're reading through it. It's so beautiful as a novel. I read it a couple of times just because I wanted to kind of recapture that feeling. Yeah, it's a gorgeous book. It's called How We Named the Stars by Andreas N. Orderica. And yeah, if you want to feel and really feel something, then this is the book for you.
Right, well, I'm going to stay with the feels,
Yeah.
and I am going to talk about Birding by Rose Ruin, which gave me all the feels when I read it too. So it's a story of there's two parallel stories, and the first story is about Lydia, who was like a famous pop strill in the day. That was a very smash hits word there.
Stroll, yes, absolutely.
And so
Patsy Kensit was a pop stroll back in the day in Great London.
So she was in a band in the 90s with her friend whose name I can't remember. And they end up living together in this book with her friend's daughter as well. And Lydia had this sort of on again, off again lover who's a writer, and he's going to write about their relationship in his new play, and she's horrified by this because her memory of the relationship and his memory of the relationship is completely different. And and so a lot of her section is about her coming to terms with that past relationship and what it means to her now, and not wanting to be seen as a victim, but also wanting him to know like what he did, and it's really well done. That sort of that push pull, that contradictory wants when you have gone through something, and it's so they stay in this sort of crusty, down at heel seafood seaside town. And also in this seaside town is uh, uh, Joyce and her mother Betty, and they have lived together. And she's a middle-aged woman now, but they live together, and she's never not lived with their mum. And their dad left in dodgy circumstances decades ago, and they used to be high hegians in the town, but now like they've totally fallen from circumstances, and the relationship between Joyce and Betty is not particularly healthy. And so it's about coming to terms with your past on both sides, and how you try and work towards a future that you can bear. And it's about finding out who you really are. Because Jane and her mum Betty, they're kind of sort of like strange they've got this sort of strange fashion performance thing where they're kind of stuck in the past, in their glorious past. And she starts Joyce starts a like a sort of surreptitious relation, is that the right word?
Yeah.
Secret, I'll be simpler, relationship with this guy that she meets in this sort of working man's club. And she loves him, but she also notices things about him that she doesn't quite like. And it's just a really wise, lovely story about like just accepting yourself. And plus, it's got the tastiest looking ice cream on the cover. I
Very
mean,
nice ice
if
cream.
that
Yeah.
doesn't want to make you lick a book, I don't know what will. Folk usually smell them, but with this one, it's
Look a book today, folks.
oh,
Well,
this one.
talking about a book which is about accepting who you are and being who you are, I'm going to talk about Malachi Talak's That
Mm.
Beautiful Atlantic Waltz. And the Skinny, as they do every year, ask for my Scottish book of the, or for my book of the year. It is my book of the year. And this is my choice this year. It's
That's
just
fair enough. If you hadn't chosen that, I would have picked that.
so it is two separate timelines which slowly come together in the most beautiful way, the most artful way. It's a
Mm.
sensationally, apart from anything else, the writing is amazing in it. And you've got a, excuse me, it opens at sea on a whaling boat. And it's only the 1950s, you know,
I
it
know, but it
feels
feels,
like
yeah.
centuries ago, but it wasn't. It was going out of Shetland, and then it jumps between that time to Jack, who's the kind of present day. Sonny is the one on the whaling boat, and then you've got Jack in present day Shetland, an older man, although he doesn't seem that old to me. I have to say, he seems a bit. You know, I really identify with this guy a lot, who really is now kind of, you know, he's kind of resigned, if that's the right word. It's probably not the right word, to being alone with his music and his books, and he's got his guitar, and you know, his life is simple, and he doesn't seem to mind it. He's come, and then something happens. He is gifted something, and again, I don't want to spoil anything, and that really changes the direction of his life at this late period in life, and he finds out that, you know, having others in your life and letting them in isn't such a bad thing.
Mm.
And nothing spectacular really happens in
I
it. You know,
know.
the twist in it is so slight you don't even realize perhaps that it's a twist, but or at least, you know, the thing that kind of kicks it all off. But it is, and it's just about how everyday life can be so dramatic and so beautiful, and a kind of accepting of how you are and how other people are. You know, you said earlier on about, you know, art about good people, and that's
Yeah,
exactly what this is. It's about the
exactly.
best people in so many ways.
Oh, the shopkeeper, I've forgotten her name, but she
Yeah.
is just like she she's like
Well,
the goddess of the village.
again, I'm not going to give away a twist, but his something happens, and it's the slightest of things
I
happens when
know.
he's younger, which just changes him and affects things. And he
Oh,
leaves Shetland, and you think, oh no, and the guy who kind of starts this out, it's only in latter years he realizes, oh, I really shouldn't, that was wrong. And he
yeah,
does it for the right reasons. And that's
yeah.
the thing, doing things for the right reasons. You can't control what the outcome will be. And I mean, it's poetic in places. The last chapter where they're at sea and the whales involved, and it's just
Mm.
so beautifully written. It's one of the best endings to a novel I think I've ever had. I should say,
Oh, you're making me want to read it again.
and also it comes with an album. I've got that as
Yeah.
well, that beautiful Atlantic Waltz. So Jack is a songwriter. His songs are in the novel in different kind of script on the page. And
Hmm.
Malky decided, I'm going to make this into an album of songs. It's a beautiful album. Very
Yeah.
much country. He's a big country fan, Americana
Oh,
fan. That's the thing. He's obsessed with it. And yeah, it's not just my book of the year. I think it's by far and away my book of the year. One of the best I've read in a long, long time. I
yeah.
identified with it so much. And yeah, I love that idea of the just there's no big dramas, but it's just everyday drama. And I think there's
Yeah.
something lovely in capturing that.
And that's what makes it so special, in a way. Like, um because it's about life as you totally recognize it. You go to the shops, you get your messages, you take a walk up the hill, and
But you're
you
never sure what just might happen. There might be
I
that little
know.
one thing that
Yeah,
switches things around, and also, I mean, I'm concentrating on Jack's life in present day Shetland, but the storyline, the life of Sonny, and then his partner, his wife,
yeah.
and then the
The uncle,
uncle,
sort of the great uncle.
the uncle who that
Yeah.
relationship. It's just in some ways it's odd, but it's actually so natural and
Uh-huh.
so human and believable. The whole
Yeah,
thing is just so believable.
yeah, yeah. No, I'm with you. I'm absolutely with you. And it would have been in my pile if I knew, if I didn't know that it was on your pile.
Well, I'm glad you didn't pick it because I really wanted to real praise it.
Yeah, well, I did that because I
There
was like, no, I can't just say I'll take that one.
are a couple we should say to
I know.
listeners. We had a couple of doublers, and that was probably one of them, which we'll talk about later on. But yeah,
Well, I'm going to talk about one now
okay.
because going from the ordinary, the beautiful ordinary, going to go to the mad extraordinary.
So tell us what it is.
I know this is a proof, so it doesn't have the title or the author on it. But this is called Freak's Law and it's by Jane Flett. And ostensibly it is about ordinariness because it's set in this small Scottish town where nothing exciting happens. And everybody just lives their dull grey lives in their dull grey boxes doing dull grey things. And then in the summer, the circus comes to town.
Freak's Law comes to town.
Yeah.
So I just read this recently, the review of it's in the current episode issue of the Skinny, and again, it's one of my top books of the year. I just think it's sensational.
Yeah, yeah. Because, I did call all those people dull grey boxes, dull grey do. Not all of them are. And even though, like, they're clearly, the author is inviting you to, to be on the side of the freaks law, which is fair enough. Um, because human empathy being what it is, you don't outright. Well, you do. Well, some of them are really tedious, awful people, and but at the same time, particularly the women folk of the town, there is a certain empathy towards them because they've just been ground down into this reality of theirs that doesn't really give them much. And then the freaks law come to town, and well, I mean, God, there's the transvestite, and there's the big fat woman, but she's brilliant. It feels terrible just saying the transvestite, the big fat woman, because there's so brilliant characters, but I've forgotten all their names because my memory's terrible. Um, oh, the freaks are brilliantly drawn out, and So because it's a book about conformity and the price of conformity.
And the people in the village who are attracted by the freak's law are the ones who are either have been kind of denied or put down, as you say, like the wife of one of the central characters, or the younger people who
Yeah,
want to change and want to get,
yeah,
they're attracted there as well. The
yeah,
characters, particularly now, the pin lady, the kind of central
yeah, yeah.
kind of nihilist who just wants to see the
Oh my
world burn.
God. Like, I do like all the freaks laws. In fact, I love all the
I'm
freaks
going to get
laws.
another name, so you keep talking.
Yeah, but I'm not sure I loved her as much because she was just chaos personified, and not always in a, I don't know, it because a lot of because it was in a destructive way as well as a
Oh, she
creative
says that
way.
she wants to kind
Yeah,
of burn it and see what
burn it to
happens
the
at the end
ground,
of it.
which I
Yeah.
understand because that's the thing, like particularly because obviously the freak slaw folks stand for people who have dared to go against conformity and who are absolutely themselves and who absolutely are proud of themselves and so they should be and their magical gifts and who they are and their daring and audacity and all that brilliant, wonderful stuff. And, if you are one of those people who have dared to be different and paid for it, then you can completely understand the idea of wanting to burn that shit to the ground.
But she does pick a kind of non-threatening character and says, "I'm going to
Yeah,
destroy you to see, for shits and giggles, almost,
yeah,
And with the Barbie doll as the voodoo doll, I just thought, and I was speaking to a friend of mine who was brought up as in the fair. That's what his family did,
right,
and
okay,
he said that actually it wasn't unlike that when they went to town. Because suddenly it's like, oh, the fair's coming to town, so the
yeah.
guys kind of hated them, and the girls were like, oh, they were kind of like,
The
oh, the
Carney
rock
boys, the
stars,
boys on the
the Carly
waltzers.
boys, the kind of slightly bad boys who could get you a free go on the waltzers. I
Then
was
if you want to
telling
go
him,
faster.
you've got to read this book, Darren, because I think you'll really kind of appreciate it. But it's such. I mean, talk about when two worlds collide, two
Yeah.
fantastic worlds collide. It made me think a little bit of League of Gentlemen. So you've
All
got the
right.
town,
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah,
Royston Vasey town, and then you've got this cast of characters. So the You're My Wife Now, kind of Papa
yeah.
Lazarou kind of coming in.
Because there is definitely a sort of Pied Piper feeling about it as well. Like it's like they want to like pipe the children away
Yeah,
from the dull town, like like the Pied Piper. And is it the rats? I can't. Is
it
the
is.
Pied?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. He takes the children because he doesn't get rid of the rat or whatever it
yeah,
is. The town
yeah.
anyway. That's a book for another day. But yeah, I could talk to you about Freak's Law all evening. It's just
I
such
know because
a great book.
it does have serious points to make
Very much so.
about conformism and all that kind of stuff, but it is also just magic fun as well. Like I love how
And
unapologetic
Jane
the
Fleck's
Carnies
writing
are.
is so quotable in time.
Yeah,
There's and I did remember it. It was something like the place had the whiff of something like testosterone and scampies. There's something. It's so good. It's something along those lines. Because they're outside the pub and they're looking for a fight, basically.
yeah. And then there's this big massive climactic end, which we won't
No.
give away, but yeah. But if you want something weird and wonderful and wise, then you can do no wrong than to go for Freak's Law.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Now I'm just thinking what I'm going to talk about next. Well, something that's not weird and wise, but I'd like to talk about it, one, because I think it's a very funny book. And also, I've done a lot of events with this man over the year, so I want to talk about it. And it's David Belcher's The Newspaper Man. Now, if the name is familiar, David Belcher was a journalist for a long time, wrote about arts and culture in Scotland, particularly music for the Herald and other people. The only person I know who's written for the Sunday Poets and Marxism Today. And I love that juxtaposition. And it's very David Belcher, that juxtaposition. So I've done a lot of events with David, and they've been wonderful to do. And when I first started doing events with him, he was saying, well, it's not autobiographical. It's called The Newspaper Man, I should say. Not autobiographical. I did an event where his family were in on the event, and when he said that, they burst out laughing at the back. You know, I've since done others with him recently, and he's kind of admitting now, yeah, it's quite autobiographical. But I love it because it's about partly set in Glasgow, partly set in Italy. In the now, what is the town? The most Scottish town in Italy. It's very
Oh,
famous.
Barry? Is it Barry?
No, Barca. Is it Barca?
Barca.
Yeah, Barca.
Aye.
So it's
Or
renamed
Barga.
Castel de
Barga.
Colonia. And
That
anyway,
is the
so
one with the
that
fish and
place,
chips
and
festival.
yeah, exactly. So he's been on holiday there, and with Helen Fitzgerald actually.
All right, okay.
Who anyway? So, what's that in the book? That kind of represents heaven, and Glasgow represents hell. It's very much that kind of, when he returns to Glasgow, as he has to do. It's like Dante's trip through the circles. And it's so funny and so. If you want a laugh, then this is about the funniest and wittiest. He's incredibly witty. His turn of phrase is fantastic. There's a section in a record shop where he talks about how the boy wanted to name everything in alphabetical order, including T's, which would include all the this. So it would include the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, yeah, and he works in a record shop himself. Everything he says, I say, David, that's you. David, that's you. But hey, yeah, so it's about growing up and growing old and trying to learn and not growing up and not growing old. And it's about men being idiots and women being so much smarter than them. This is all David's words. And how even late on in life, there's the chance, again, the hope that he will be saved. But there's also, it's kind of, he wants to make a film with some of his mates about this
Oh, yeah.
Taggart character. Yeah, there's so much going on in it. And there's a scene in a kind of sex club, which is really unexpected, very, very funny. And there's lots of journalists who I think probably recognize themselves in the book. He says it's not them. But yeah,
Sure,
it's
watch it.
and there's a kind of takedown of current day Byers Road, although I think he calls it Kelvin Grove Avenue or something like that. He calls it a different name. That's so spot on. He's got the journalist's eye. He can absolutely kind of get to the meat of the situation in a sentence or a phrase.
Yeah.
That's really good. So it's the funniest and one of the most entertaining novels of the year by David Belcher, and it's called The Newspaper Man. And it's with our friends at Into Books and Into Creative, more of whom later.
Mm. Well, I'm going to stick with the La Dolce Vita then, and I'm going to talk about a cookery book.
Oh, great.
Now, in Edinburgh, there's three restaurants all run by the same chef, whose name has just completely fallen out of my head. Oh my God,
Okay.
Roberta.
All right.
Um, uh, oh my God, and the book's called the Changing Tide. Oh my God, I can't remember her name. It's a double barrel name. Anyway,
Does she have red hair?
no, do you remember she was on the Great British Menu and she did
Yeah.
that amazing pie?
Yeah, I think she has got red hair, if it's who I'm thinking of.
Roberta Caron. Oh my
Well,
God. Anyway, sorry for my brain fart.
is it not on the book cover?
Yeah, but well, I don't have the book
Oh, right.
because I've never actually read the book in physical form.
Okay.
I've only read it in PDF. And it's called The Changing Tides. And it is beautiful.
Roberta
And
Hall McCarran.
there you go. And I was getting there.
And she has indeed got red hair. I've remembered that correctly. Yeah, I saw her on the Great British Menu. She's a fantastic chef. I
Yeah.
noticed, I didn't know she had three places. I knew she had one in Leith.
You,
Is that right? Is one of them in Leith?
they're all in Leith. So the one around the corner from me is called Eleanor. It used to be called the Little Chart Room, but the Little Chart Room's moved down to Bonington, and so is our other one. They're both down in Bonington, but I can't remember the name of the third one now. And I've still not eaten in any of them. And this book did not help with the sorrow of that truth as well, because It's such a beautiful, brilliant book. It's done by Kitchen Press, which is a
Right.
small publisher based in Dundee, and
Yeah,
they
I've
do.
interviewed them. They're fantastic.
Their books are so beautiful, like so well produced, just gorgeous, gorgeous books. And so this one's called The Changing Time. So it's a seasonal book. So each section is about each season. So it goes spring, summer, autumn, winter, and every chapter opens with like how you should eat oysters that month, that season. Which is amazing to me. And the recipes they are both simple and intricate as well. Like all the pictures are so clean looking, the food's so clean looking, and and it goes through that sort of starters, main courses, puddings in each season, and then each chapter ends with how to throw an ideal dinner party in that season using all seasonal produce, including a cocktail as well, which, with my homemade blackberry bourbon smash, I'm all about that. And as I say, I've only ever read it in PDF because
Right.
I've never got a hard copy because I get sent lots of books in PDF
Yeah.
for my work, and I just keep going. If like every so often, if I've got like a spare 5 minutes or a spare 2 minutes, I'll just click on it and have a look at the pictures because it's so gorgeous, and I want to live in her world.
I must check that out. That could be a wee Christmas present to myself because
Oh,
I
oh,
do
it
like
would.
her. I do like her as a chef, and I think
Yeah,
that's
and it doesn't quite have the pie that she made in that Great British Menu program, but it does have a pie in it in the winter. The short rib with the mashed potato, the picture of that, oh my God, you'll just all the dribble will just cascade down your chin.
a good thing.
Always a good
Whenever
thing.
I hear anyone mention oysters, I have to bring up Frank Skinner's quote when I was living in Australia at the time, and he was on television. He was on like kind of their version of Good Morning, and they'd done a cookery thing about oysters. And then they turned to Frank on the couch and say, "Do you like oysters yourself, Frank?" And he said, "No, to me it's like licking phlegm from a tortoise shell." I thought that was the best ever.
I mean, that is a good description, but also,
Brilliant description. And
but
I just
also,
thought,
Frank, you're missing out, man. You're
oh,
missing out.
very, very funny. Anyway, well, listen, I'll go for a non-fiction then. And I'll fess up, this is a good friend of mine, but his book is it's an extraordinary book. It's called Joshua in the Sky, a Bud Memoir by Rog Glass. Oh, and how do you even begin to describe it? So, Rog Glass's nephew Joshua died the same day he was born from a blood condition that they both share. He was 3 hours old. And having spoken to Rog both on the podcast and in life, there was incredible guilt that came to Rog about this, thinking I should have found out more about my own condition. Could that have saved Joshua? Now Joshua's parents say no, don't be, but
Yeah.
Rod, it really brought him down, and he kind of he, yeah, it really affected his life in all sorts of ways. So this memoir is an attempt not only to kind of reconcile that situation, but also come to terms with some of the texts that have helped him through his life and through this period, and coming to terms with it. It's a book unlike anything I've ever read before. I think possibly because no one's ever written it before. And it really will. It's about storytelling because he looks to storytellers to kind of heal him, if you like.
Mm,
That's part of the way he does it. I can't remember if this is in the book or whether we spoke about this. I cannot remember, it's kind of all blurs a little bit. But
mm.
at one point, he's giving all his books away to Oxfam, the big Oxfam bookshop, because he kind of thinks, no, this doesn't matter. This is frivolous. Reading, now this is someone who teaches, at
Yeah.
university on English. This is frivolous. It does no meaning. It's no matter when compared with life and death. And then slowly he realizes, well, that's not true. And this is where you find
This is
understanding.
life.
This is understanding and empathy and sympathy and all of those things, often through stories. And so it's quite a voyage of discovery, I would say, that Rog goes through. and at times it's not a particularly easy read, and nor should it be. But he's such a good writer anyway. Such a varied writer. He's written so many different things over the
Mm,
years. But this is unlike anything he's written since, or will again, I would imagine. But it's not just a celebration and a kind of testament and a remembrance of Joshua. It's also a celebration of storytelling and writing and writers and all of those things, which make our lives so richer and give us greater understanding to even the most darkest of days.
mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a great book.
Well, I'm going to stick with love letters to novels, and I am going to talk about The Cracked Mirror by Christopher Brookmeyer,
Yes,
which,
I have
you
got.
know, oh, see, you've got the fancy hardback. Um, which, like obviously it's a crime novel, but it is so much more than that as well because it is a tribute to crime fiction as well, and it's a tribute to creativity and writing as well because so if you don't know, it's a story where two stories converge. One is told in follows, oh, what's her name? Dorothy? No, wait, I've written it down. What's her
It's
name?
Penny
Penny.
Coin. Penny
Penny.
Coin.
Don't know where Dorothy came from. Penny. She's like the old school sort of Agatha Christie, Miss Marple type figure, and her story is rendered in, that sort of golden era of crime fiction.
What we might
Um,
call cozy crime these days.
Cozy crime, yes.
Hmm.
And then there is the other story with Johnny Hawk.
Yeah, Johnny Hawk. Yeah.
And he is the hard-boiled Los Angeles detective who doesn't play by the rules and all that kind of thing. And they're both investigating different murders. And so you start reading it thinking, well, what's going on here? Well, of course, the two stories combine in a very unexpected way. And when their stories combine, the book completely changes into something else entirely, which isn't really about solving a crime or murder or anything. It's about memory. It's about grief. And it's really, really moving.
It
And
is.
it's
It's
all,
incredibly moving. And
yeah.
I'm going to name drop here, but I did an event last night with Chris.
Oh, you did? Yeah, I saw
Yeah.
that on Twitter. Yeah.
Yeah, so he said it came to him. The idea came to him. He had this vision as he was going through an airport, I think. Said, I had a vision of kind of Miss Marple in a little village going about life, and then a SWAT team arrived with Kevlar jackets and guns, and what would that be like? And that's where this idea of bringing those things together came from.
I mean, that does happen in the book.
It's also a very difficult book to talk about, particularly at events,
I
without giving
know.
spoilers away.
I know, because there is a massive element that I'm not talking about,
Yes. Yeah.
which I can't talk about
Oh, and he would
because
appreciate
it
that.
would it would really spoil it. But once you read it and know it, then that highlights how clever the book is as well.
For me, it's a book that genuinely, people often say this, but genuinely it rewards a second reading because you
Yeah,
go back and you go, oh, right, I missed that little Easter egg,
yeah,
I missed that clue, and there's loads of them there. It really,
yeah,
when
yeah.
I first started reading it, I kind of went, this sounds like Chris has dropped two different manuscripts, picked them up as one, and nobody, because he's Chris Brookmeyer, nobody said, this is weird. It's
I
so
was enjoying it, like
yeah.
because it was still enjoyable. But as I say, like once other key elements of the story come together, then you realize just how ambitious it is and how clever it is, and also the whole full message of what it's trying to achieve as well, and which is a message that I think a lot of writers will really, really identify with.
I think writers, I think readers will love it. I absolutely love
Yeah.
it. Writers will really love it. It's
Yeah.
very smart. And he
Mm.
did say a couple of things. One, that he could only have written this now.
Yeah.
And also, he could only have written this after doing the Ambrose Parry novels with his wife, because
Okay.
that kind of division that he does with Ambrose Parry, which he writes with
Mm.
his wife Marissa, he was able to almost do that himself and divide
Right.
Chris Brookmeyer, if you like, and do them differently. So he would write chunks of the cozy crime in one bit and chunks of the hardcore crime in another section, and bring them together. I think it's one of the great novels of the year. I mean,
Oh my God, totally. Like, I mean, it won the McIlvanney, didn't it?
it
And
did.
deservedly so, because, you know, I enjoy crime fiction, but this is so much more than that. But it still is completely crime
Oh, yeah.
fiction and is a massive, massive tribute
It's
to
someone
what
who
crime
really
fiction can do.
loves and understands crime
Yeah.
fiction. And he said, I was worried when I was going meta that people would think, oh, you're kind of, not taking the piss, but, making comment on cozy crime or on hard work,
Yeah.
or you prefer one or the other or whatever it might be. But he's managed to, he's not, he loves them both. He understands them both, and he
Hmm.
brings them both in together, and the character and the sense of place is so strong.
I
I
know.
genuinely thought that I'd been to the village in Perthshire, and it was only like, oh no, I've made that up. Really, I'm sure I've been there. It's got such a strong sense of place to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
So
since
good.
you mentioned crime, I'm going to write something for Scottsley Hay when I look at my top 10 crime books. That'll be around soon. But I thought I'd just mention them here quickly,
Go for it.
because, so that people don't feel left out. So they include Douglas Skelton's Jonas Flint latest, A Grave for a Thief, which I love the Jonas Flint books. Kind of crime, maybe not, but Val McDermid's Queen Macbeth, which was her latest in the Darkland Tales. Great tales, great book. Robert J. Harris, who I
All
spoke on
right.
the podcast, and it's Buchan, it's John Buchan. It's that kind of what you call him? Richard Hannay,
Yeah.
13
Yeah.
Steps, kind of take on that. Philip Miller's The Hollow Tree, which I really, really enjoyed. I spoke to Philip during the year as well. Just makes me realise how many of these Polygon spoke to Michael recently at The Torments. I loved this book. I loved talking to Michael about it, especially when he admitted that his editor or his publisher, Karen, said, can you take the werewolves out? It's a bit much. I loved that confession. Martin Stewart, Double Proof. Again, with Polygon, spoke to Martin and did a couple of events with Martin. Another great Glasgow novel, and a real twist on crime fiction as well. I really enjoyed that. We've spoken in the past about how much we both love the Skelf series of books, and Doug's latest was out this year, Living as a Problem, and I'm guessing there's more to come from the Skelfs.
We love the Skells.
Love the Skelfs. Right at the beginning of the year, a kind of science fiction crime,
Yeah.
Maud Wolf's 13 Ways to Kill Lulabelle Rock, one of the best titles of the year, without a doubt. But also, I mean, kind of Blade Runner meets.
It's
Uh,
such an amazing concept. I
yeah,
was just like, why has nobody done this before?
brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. Spoke to
Yeah.
Maud about it as well, as I did Louise Welsh and her latest To the Dogs, set at Glasgow Uni. And again, because I know the university and some of the people that work there, you start thinking, oh, okay. But yeah, I did an event with Louise about the book as well. Never fails to deliver, Louise Welsh, no doubt about it. And then the one we've just mentioned, The Cracked Mirror. So not just one of the best crime books of the year, one of the best books of the year is. If you've never read any Chris Brookmeyer, what a place to start.
Oh, totally.
And if you think you don't like crime fiction, what a place to prove yourself wrong.
Yeah.
Do you have
So
another
when
crime one that you wanted to
I
talk about?
do, but I was just but talking when's that post going up?
Oh, not for, I don't know, to be honest. Not for a wee while. Not for a wee while. Next
But
week.
before Christmas time.
Oh, before Christmas. Yes, yes, yes.
Right. Okay. Well, I'll complete your little your crime roundup with another crime fiction title, which And the proof, once more, doesn't have the title or the author on the cover, but this is Hunted by Aber Mukherjee.
Oh, I love Abir Mukherjee. I spoke to him during the year as well.
Yeah, have you read Hunted?
No,
Oh, you should. It's totally. I mean, he's more well known for his series, his
that's right.
Wyndham and Banerjee series,
That's right.
set in the 20s Calcutta,
Hmm.
um, sort of post-war, end of the Raj days, which that's a brilliant series as well, brilliant historical crime. But Hunted is very much a standalone thriller, and it's set very much in the present day. It's set in a year where there's an American presidential election on the cards. And it's, oh my God, it's plot-tastic galore. I mean, it's a big fat thing, but you will speed through it because it is so edge of your seat stuff, like plot twists everywhere. So there's plot strands. So there's Sajid, who is he lives in London. He's first generation immigrant, and has just sort of done the sensible thing, and brought up his kids, and and
Hmm.
his daughter Alia is in America, though he doesn't know that. And it starts off with a big explosion in a mall in America, and it's obviously a terrorist um, crime. And in the investigation, the daughter Alia is shown to be a suspect who's in this terror group. Um, and Sajid has absolutely no idea that his daughter is being blamed, is why his daughter is in America and in some kind of terrorist group. So he sneaks over to America to try and find her before the police get her, because he's just not convinced that she's got anything to do with any terrorist action. So, but Alia has got herself involved in some dodge with some dodgy people, and Sajid is visited in London by a mum, an American mum, who says, "You've got to come with me to America because her son Greg is also implicated in this terrorist organization." And then the third strand is the sort of police investigator Shreya Mystery trying to solve what this terrorist organization plans to do in the run up to the American election, because they know that the right wing sort of candidate is going to make hay out of the fact that there's terrorism happening in the country. So people are it's like a road movie, it's a thriller, it's a sort of espionage spy thing. There's like different factions in the FBI and the police work together in different departments. And as I say, there's a squillion million twists and turns, not all that you don't see coming, and it's just a rip-roaring ride. Through it all. It's just really, really, really well done and really entertaining.
It was shortlisted for the McIlvanney, I think, this year.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
I think it was. Yeah, I had the shortlisted authors on the podcast, and I spoke to them, and that's why it sounds so familiar. Yeah, another one to check out. Yeah, another great year for crime. Another fantastic year for crime, and also a fantastic year for historical fiction.
Mm.
The one I'd like to talk about, and there's many I could have done, is El McRae's Remember, 5th of December, and a gunpowder treason and a plot to destroy the British Empire, of course. But what it does also is take the look at race relations at that period,
All
where
right.
you had notionally the end of slavery, and I'm using terrible inverted commas there, but how people were still being treated and referred to at the time as well. And I love a bit of historical fiction, particularly when it speaks to the present day, as the best ones do. And this really does do that. This was, again, one of the first things I read this year. But it really captures that time in London. And I love that kind of period of, plot and intrigue and the kind
Is
of
that
small.
not like, did that not happen just when James the First and Sixth became king? Is that not that? Is
No,
that when the gunpowder plot?
no, listen, again, you're asking me questions I don't know. The history, well, no,
Because it was
British
ostensibly about
Empire would have been later
Protestants
than
and
that, wouldn't it?
Catholics and you know the
That,
union of the
unfortunately,
crowns and all that, wasn't it?
that's still going on.
Yeah. Not in the well, I don't know, whatever happens in the House of Parliament these days.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's that idea of empire, and obviously at the time that people have been overseas, and you've had the slave trade and all of those things. It made me think a little bit about the period Taboo. Do you know that TV show Taboo with Tom Hardy? Oh
No.
my God, it's amazing. All about the kind of British Indian Trading Company and how it basically
Oh no,
owned
I've never heard
the
of that.
world. Oh, what do you do on
I
Sunday nights at
know, I
9 o'clock?
know. I mean, I
Uh,
watch telly. I love a good telly.
well, it was a few years ago now. Oh, you're in
All
for
right.
such a treat. Tom Hardy in a frock coat and a velvet top hat. Nothing
Be honest,
better.
I've never really got the Tom Hardy thing.
I have.
Yeah, yeah. But you know that sounds good fun. So you know
Oh
I'll
no, dude, really check it out. It's got a great
yeah.
cast as well. You'll love it. Absolutely love it. So that kind of period in London, where it was kind of the center of the universe in some ways.
Mm,
And what happens is there's decay going on kind of around it. And a parliament that's trying to do the right thing, or so you think, and actually what the realities of that might be. And then
mm,
you've got this brother and sister at the center of it who are just basically trying to survive and get by in a world that judges them immediately because of the color of their skin.
right.
So yeah, it's a wonderful novel by El McRae, and I really recommend it if you don't know it
Is
at
it
all.
is it based on the actuality or is it sort of a speculative historical fiction?
It's novel.
Hmm.
I know what you mean, based on the
Like a
actual.
reimagined, or is it like based on something that actually happened?
Oh, I think there are I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know the history of the transatlantic slave
Right.
trade enough to know how much of it is actually true. And how much of this, but they're two fictional characters, and I think most of the characters are fictional. There may be real people in here.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
Yeah. But a lot of it is clandestine, so I wouldn't know. It's a kind of
Yeah.
secret groups and plots and all that kind of stuff going on. But yeah, God, I'll have to do more research before I do that.
Sorry. No, no, it's just the reason why I use the word speculative
Right,
is because of my next choice.
right.
Oh, and this is Nova Scotia Volume 2. It's a short story collection. Now, years and years ago,
Oh,
20
I see what you
years.
mean in terms of speculative. I know.
Aye,
I don't think it is in that sense.
right, okay, okay.
I might be wrong,
Um,
but
so in 2005, Nova Scotia Volume 1 came out. And I worked on it because I worked for the publisher of the very first Nova Scotia collection,
I remember it.
which was, you know, a snapshot of what was happening in Scotland with speculative fiction at the time.
Yep.
Because, you know, I mean, we have just spoken about crime, but like Scotland is always really talked about as a crime fiction place. And it's never really talked about in the same terms as a speculative fiction place. And that's always puzzled me because there is an absolute raft of Scottish sci-fi, fantasy, speculative, all those genre writers. That was the case then. It's even more of the case now. So this is the second collection. I can't believe it's nearly 20 years. Oh my God. And the only people that from the first collection that have made it into the second collection are the two editors, because you know, fair enough, and Ken MacLeod.
Oh
Um,
yes.
because Ken MacLeod was he was the guest of honor at Worldcon because the first one was released for when Worldcon came to Glasgow, and this one was released for when it returned to Glasgow. So that's the reason why Volume Two's come out. And but you know, it just completely shows you how speculative and sci-fi fiction and fantasy and all that has grown and changed over the last 20 years. And but you know, as with the first volume, it's just jam-packed full of brilliant short stories that like just melt your brain and just make you smile, make you scared, make you sort of shake your head and wonder. So you get all sorts in here. You get folk singers that are frozen in peat bogs and then like taken to future space, and then uh you've got embroidery that can like predict the future, and you've got the revenge. You've got the revenge of the the folk that actually built the new town on the people who are in the new town.
Right.
So there's the oh, it's mad. It's like this crazy futuristic invention that's not quite perfected yet, and it starts accidentally killing loads of residents of Newtown houses. But then it turns out that, particularly with the protagonist of the story, that whose great 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 granddad was actually one of the folk that worked in the quarry that made the sandstone that built the houses of the new town. And the new town is just as, justly celebrated for its beauty, but not many people talk about the pain and the strife and the lives lost of the folk that actually got the rocks and built the houses and did all the craft that makes the houses look so beautiful. So it's a really good sort of juxtaposition of history, future, class war, rah. Oh, there's just tons of stories that look at climate change, that look at class, that look at technology and its dangers and all that. It's just a really great collection, and I hope it doesn't take another 20 years for a third one to come out.
I got a few things. First of all, I now realise what you meant by speculative fiction. In my mind kind of went blank. So El McCrae's Remember is not that. It's
Right.
very much
Okay.
a historical novel.
Right.
Secondly, I always think that speculative fiction almost a bit like crime did for a long time, although I think crime now is very much mainstream, almost survives on its own. People that like it know where to find it, and
Hmm.
Ken
So
maybe,
fantasy has absolutely skyrocketed in the past
yeah,
couple of years in
yeah.
particular.
But
Like it
again, we
used
we
to,
hardly ever talk about it. I think it's got that
yeah,
kind of um, its own area that they know it, they like it, they know who each other is. Ian Banks tipped into it, of course he did. Perhaps the
yeah,
most successful. Doug Johnson's done it with
yeah.
the Space
He's
Between Us.
he's in Nova Scotia as well.
Yeah, so people have crossed over and done these different things, but I like I kind of like, I know a few writers that write in that area. They're quite happy, that they're doing it and people read them, and that's it.
Well, its reputation is changing too, because I mean, let's be honest, fantasy and all that kind of thing was very much seen as a sort of spotty teenage boy genre. It's
Dungeons and
absolutely not.
Dragons.
It's absolutely not.
No, I know.
It's not that at all anymore. Like, I don't know if you've heard the word romantasy this
Oh
year.
God, yeah, it made me a little bit of sick came up in my mouth the first time I heard that.
It's massive though. Honestly, the amount of books that are romantasy that fly out the door, it's quite insane.
Dear me. Right, let's moving swiftly on.
Okay then.
Since you've picked a kind of compilation, I'm going to do the same, and it's the latest New Writing Scotland. And I don't think
All
we've
right.
spoken about this previously, but what a great publication New Writing Scotland has been. This is number 42, which
I
is
know.
terrifying. It's put out by the Association of Scottish Literary Studies, ASL.
Yeah. Again,
And
it's sort of like a sort of annual thing. It's kind of like I kind of feel like it signifies the coming of autumn.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. It comes out at the same time every year. This one, which is called Don't Even Ask Too Hot, Death. If
Oh
you're wondering about
yes,
the acronym,
that's a really
Death.
clear.
But it was been edited by Custin Innes and Chris Pawici, and the Gaelic editor is Niall O'Gallagher. And it's just a great, if you want to have a snapshot of what's happening in Scotland at the moment, these are always great. They're great to pick up anyway, but it's always a great place to find out because it really does make brand new writers, often first time published, with well-kent names as well, who still want to be published in New Writing Scotland. And I think that speaks so well of it that, you know, people such as Donald S. Murray are still, you know, finding themselves between the pages, you know,
Yeah.
Christopher White and people like that. Yeah, it's a great collection. There's some great stories in it. There's one set in Wishaw that will absolutely break your heart. And I don't often say that.
Poor Wishaw.
Wishy. Oh, Wishy. I love Wishy. I used to go and play handball in Wishy. That's a story for another day. So, next one from yourself.
Hey, I'm going to stick with non-fiction, and we've spoken about Glasgow, but you know, we should probably speak a little bit about Edinburgh this year.
If you must. I'm joking.
What now?
I've just remembered. I've just reviewed Alan Taylor's.
Yeah, well, I watched your podcast with him.
Yeah.
I've not read his one yet, but I've read this one, and I read Richard DeMarco's Edinburgh book as well, because seemingly, you know, it's the 900th birthday of Edinburgh.
Apparently so. Happy 900th Edinburgh.
Well, according to this book, it's the 900th anniversary of its first mention, and maybe as it being recognised as a royal burgh. So obviously, you know, it's probably older than that, but that's the official date, and we'll stick by it if it means that we can celebrate. Because why
Celebrate it and have a year of events with 900 on all the t-shirts.
Yeah. Why not? So this is one of the books that have come out for Edinburgh's 900th birthday, and it's told by Donald Smith, who is well known as a storyteller. In fact, I think he's like the high Hegian of the storytelling centre in Edinburgh. And so he just like rips through 900 years of literary history that tells the story of the city. Now, because, you know, for so long, the history of the city is wrapped up in the court and royals and all that kind of stuff. A lot of that kind of stuff is in here. So it's not so much about the people as the people. As maybe a more modern history would be. But at the same time, you know, it's a really great it's a really great introduction to the sort of the the canon, really, the sort of the if you don't want to like read a whole anthology that's about that thick, then this is a really good place to start to get to know all your Dunbars and your Fergusons and your
Cannon's the big gun in the castle, is that right?
that's the biggest gun of them all.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, good. Yeah, all these people that are really important.
Yeah, but it's all because he's a storyteller. It's told in such a sort of rims the campfire kind of way. Like it's not a dry academic tome. So I would say like if you want to really sort of get to know the forebears, then give this a go because it's really fast paced. It really because you know it's 900 years in this teeny tiny book.
There are lots of great, and I have to say, all joking aside, you know, my
I know
fondness
you.
I know my fondness for Edinburgh is undimming. I love the city, and there's loads of great books about it. Right,
Yeah, I mean Alan Taylor, I've not read it yet, but I will because I like the concept that he brings to these
yeah.
books that he does with the Glasgow one and now the Edinburgh one.
To use other people's words to tell the story, as I think is
Yeah,
a very clever thing to do. It's a very enjoyable read, you know.
yeah.
Yeah. And there's plenty of others as well. Right, I'll stick with the non-fiction and go from the huge celebrating a city to the most kind of personal that you might get, and it is Katie Laroney's Matilda in the Middle. Again, with Into Books, and Into have had another great year, just releasing fantastic.
It's kind of an Edinburgh book, that book, though.
Well, part of it is, I would say, part Edinburgh, part
You know, fast product and all that.
Straven. I would say part Edinburgh, part Straven. There you go. But it is, yeah, past product. So Katie Leroney was a musician in the Fizz Bombs back in the day, originally from East Kilbride. Her brothers were in bands, she was the younger sister. Went to Napier University to study publishing, I think, publishing.
All right, okay.
Yeah,
That course is still going on.
but really, she immediately, with people on the course, they formed a band in the early 80s. Lots, as you say, Fast Records, C86 movement, that whole kind of indie music scene that was absolutely thriving, possibly in Edinburgh even more than Glasgow. You know, it was a really interesting scene. And the Fizz Bombs were kind of at the heart of that, and so was Katie. So it's a book of two sides, like a good album. It's two sides. And in fact, side two, there you go. It's got side one and side two. That's the way it's structured. Every chapter references a different song, so it's a real book of music and stuff. But the Matilda of the title in the middle, and she's on the cover, is their daughter Matilda. So Katie married Douglas McIntyre, another musician who runs Creeping Bent Records, puts on the Frets concerts along with the family, and was in bands way back in the years in Glasgow. And knew the Leroney family from way back in the day. And so they get married, they've got 5 kids, and Matilda is in the middle, hence the title, Matilda in the Middle. And it's a celebration of Matilda's extraordinary life. Matilda has Down syndrome, and the way that the family, so when I say it's in 2 parts, you've got this looking back on a young life in music and all that that entails. And then you've got this really very emotional, a bit like Roger's book, emotional, the reality of family life and what that means, but also how music and art and all those things kind of help understand, just as we were talking about storytelling. Stories are told through songs, connections are made through music, all of those things are run through this book. And again, I mention it partly because it's a great read, but also because I've done quite a lot of events with Katie about the book, and everyone's just blown away, not only by her talking about it, but by the story itself. So part of it's not relatable if you've never been in a band who have been on the cover of the NME and all those things. Part of it incredibly relatable because we've all been involved in family life. And it's a celebration of that side of family life as well. It's a quite beautiful book, actually. I really do recommend it. And I should say that Douglas and Katie's band, The Secret Goldfish, I think are releasing new music coming soon. And I love The Secret Goldfish. They're a fantastic indie band from the 90s that I loved. So for me now to be able to kind of get to know them and do events with them, you know, writers I can kind of go, yeah, but musicians, oh, I get so tongue-tied about that. That's the real stars of the show. And another great year for Into Creative as well, and Into Books.
Yeah, it sounds as if they're going to have a good next year as well.
Yeah,
But we've got 2 more books each, is that right?
yeah. I've got 3 because you started. So yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
right, okay.
I think
Right,
that's right.
so right, okay. I'm going to go back to the fiction, and I probably should have talked about this when I was in my weird and wonderful phase, but this one is Phantom Limb by Chris Kohler.
Right.
It's goddamn weird,
Good. I like weird.
but it's also really it's really ordinary as well. So it's got that mixture of the uncanny. So there's strong gothic vibes here, and just ordinary life. So it's I can't remember the name of the main character because that's what happens when you're perimenopause. um, so the
I
main
will take your word for that.
so the main character whose name I've forgotten, he is a minister in a small town. He doesn't quite believe in God. He kind of just took the job. He kind of got involved in this sort of ministering life accidentally. And he's just rolling along, really, just sort of half-assing his minister duties. and he's back in the town that he grew up in, where his ex-girlfriend still lives, his family still, his dad still lives there. And so he used to be like very good at running. He was quite good as a cross-country runner, and he went off to London to try and make his fortune in running, but he got a dodgy knee, and that just killed that dream stone dead. So he's ended up back in Scotland being a minister when he doesn't quite believe in God. And but then one day, as what happens in the round the gardens of the manse, he's a bit drunk, and he stumbles upon, like, this tree has been dug up, and so he falls into the hole where this tree's been dug up, and he discovers a severed hand.
Right.
But it's not an ordinary severed hand, because the severed hand is still alive.
Right.
And so he takes it into the house, and it draws these pictures and writes these weird sentences down. And so he becomes quite obsessed with this severed hand. And then somehow the big man of the town, who like owns the fisheries, there's salmon fishery, he finds out about the hand as well. And so what he wants to do, being the big capitalist bastard that he is, he wants to make money out of this severed hand, and like start this sort of religious cult and all this kind of thing. And the minister himself kind of gets a little bit caught up with the severed hand, and he thinks this is his pathway to greatness and success and fame and fortune. But though he's like wanting that to happen, he's a very passive person. He doesn't really do anything to
Mm-hmm.
make this happen. And the fisheries man kind of takes over a wee bit, but the hand starts doing miracles around the town. And then there's a secondary story about that's set way back in the sort of Reformation times, about the artist of this precious religious book that he was delivering to Scotland, um to give to the laird of the town. But he ends up in all sort of picaresque type adventures as well. Those two strands, they don't quite come together, but they're still both really interesting juxtapositions. So it's really a tale, even though it's a fantastical tale, it's really a novel about failure and inadequacy, um and and yeah, and being not great. And it's very, very, very Scottish.
Okay, that
Like
sounds
that,
great. I have to say that sounds like right up my street. I must check that
yeah,
out.
it's like
Remind us what it's called again. So I'm going
it's
to make a
called The
note.
Phantom Limb by Chris Kohler, and this is a debut as well. A
Really
good year for debuts.
great year for debuts.
Yeah,
Absolutely, a really exciting year for maybe what's coming next.
yeah. It's weird, and so as I say, it's weird, and yet it's very, very relatable as well.
So when I mentioned Matilda in the middle, we said, so spoke about music, and particularly from the early 80s. So my next one is an absolute beast of a book by Grant McPhee.
Oh, I need to
It's
get that.
Postcards from Scotland, Scottish Independent Music, 1983 to 1995. And what I'll say is it actually goes beyond 1985. It at least goes to 1997. So Grant is a filmmaker, better known as a filmmaker, and he's done stuff on Scottish music before. And he was involved with a Hungry Beat.
Yes.
Douglas McIntyre, who is married to Katie Leroney.
Well, he was involved in that.
Yeah, of
See,
course. It all comes together.
connections.
It all comes together. So they did that book, and he had loads of interviews left over from his films, because that's how he did the films. He interviewed people that were there at the time. So I was kind of there. I was young at the beginning, at the time, but I was there a bit. But then by the time you get to the 90s, I was definitely kicking about. And so this is some of my favorite music, favorite bands. It's very much kind of, I know because I was there. What he does is sometimes it's the same gig or the same situation, and you get different points of view from different
Oh, I love that.
people.
Yeah, I love that
Um,
kind of storytelling.
and someone I'm going to talk about in a moment was in a band that's mentioned in the book. John Niven's, and there's people you don't expect to be in here. Yeah, it's if you love your music, and particularly love your Scottish indie music, or just indie music in general, wow, this is the book for you. I absolutely devoured. And when I started, I went, wow, this is big. And I was through it before I knew it.
Yeah.
And there are too many people to mention that's going on, but this is a part of Scotland's musical and cultural history, which shaped so many lives. So many
Oh,
of the people
yeah.
in this book have gone on to be artists and filmmakers and writers and also all sorts of other things, you know, and teachers, and
Yeah.
really shaped by the music and the scene from this time. And it doesn't just cover Glasgow and Edinburgh and the cities. It goes to, of course, Coatbridge, which is basically Scotland's Memphis. Bellshill and Coatbridge, you know. But you know, places like Irvine, Cumbernauld, and East Kilbride, and you know, and up north, and all sorts of different places. Music was absolutely everywhere, and Grant does his very best to cover it all. What I will say is, of course, there'll be people going, "Ah, but what about such and such, and what about," you know, but he has done his best to cover it
Yeah.
absolutely all. And what I spoke to him about it, and there's another volume coming.
Oh, wow.
It's about the kind of a 13th note scene. So you're
All
talking
right.
about
Okay.
the Delgados and
Hmm.
Belle and Sebastian and all that stuff. And I cannot wait to read it. He said, I hope to bring them out both kind of at the same time. But my publisher went, I know, no,
No.
doing that. So the realities of publishing once again kick in. Because,
What?
but yeah,
Who published that?
Omnibus Press.
All right. Okay.
He
Yeah.
also did
They
the
do a lot of good music books.
Graham Thompson Under the Ivy, the Kate Bush book,
Yeah.
which
Uh-huh.
was an updating of his previous one. I could have included that. It's a great book as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
Omnibus
think I'll
Press.
probably get that when it comes out in paperback because
Yeah,
that seems quite heavy.
yeah, but it's a fantastic read. It's because it's people's real voices and memories, and some of them will be no, I can't remember, but it's great, and it really does touch on. You know, if you're like me, you kind of know the postcard records story, you've read it elsewhere, but there's so much that you kind of
Yeah.
don't know and is elsewhere. So
I
yeah,
think it's really good when music is told through oral history like that rather than in a sort of narrative way.
it's
Like,
absolutely an oral history. And because
yeah,
the way Grant makes his films, he doesn't feel the need to be in it at all. He's kind of not
yeah,
involved. He just lets other people. It's like pointing
yeah.
at the camera and going, right, you tell me what you think. And he does that in the book as well.
Yeah, because like Please Kill Me, the sort of the tome on the
Yeah.
punk scene, that's told like that. That like you kind of know that that's what sort of brought on this as memorial device and those and it just is such a brilliant way to do it.
John Savage's England's Dreaming as
Oh
well. One of my
yes,
favourite
yes,
books of all time is
yeah, uh-huh.
exactly like that too. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So what's next from you?
It's my last book.
Is it?
Yeah, have I
Okay,
miscalculated?
what is it? And I'll tell you if you've miscalculated.
So this is a big one.
You've miscalculated.
Have I miscalculated?
Because you told me that you were going to talk about Sarah Sheridan's, because I
Oh,
took
of
it off my
course.
list.
Yeah, yeah, right. Well, I'll
Right.
talk about Sarah after this one then.
Yes.
Right. So I'll talk about this one.
Whiskey,
This
one of my
one,
favourite subjects.
well, see, it's becoming one of my favorite subjects too, because of this book and because of the author, Dave Broom,
Right.
he is like because I did a series of events with him this last month, and he is so passionate, but brilliantly down to earth passionate about whiskey. Like he feels like you feel like anybody can join in. Like sometimes a lot of drinks writers, you kind of feel like they're
An
swirling it
exclusive,
around in their
it's
mouth
an
and
exclusive club type of thing.
yeah, yeah. Whereas you don't get that with Dave at all. And this book, I mean, I don't know if it's sacrilege to say that, that you should try whiskies outside of Scotch whiskies. But this
Oh,
book and the events that we did with Dave was totally just really showed the wonders of what's happening in distilleries all around the world. So this is I think this is going to be my Bible New Year's resolution book for 2025.
Get the whiskey down you.
Aye.
It's
I read that it's
interesting.
good for you as well. It's like got good enzymes or something.
It's so interesting. Whiskey is so popular. One of the podcasts I did many years ago now was about a film about whiskey, From the Grain to the Glass, I think it was called, and it was an American director. And it's one of the most popular podcasts we've ever done because people love whiskey.
Oh my
And,
God, like yeah.
and what I think you were involved with
Oh
this as well,
yes,
weren't
I've
you?
got that. Oh, I've got that too. Ugh.
Scotch, I should say, Scotch, Cameron Ewan and Moa Reynolds, and it's the Balmoral, is it? The Balmoral Hotel?
Yeah, so this one's a little bit more fancy pants. It's
Okay,
a
but what
gorgeous
I'll say
book,
is, so it recommends 100 different whiskies, is that right?
100 different Scottish whiskies.
Yes, but not mad expensive. I mean, some of them are like,
No, no.
you could absolutely buy and not go break the bank, and it's got your Highland Parks and your Auchentoshan's and all Aberlour. Oh, I love an Aberlour. Oh. But yeah, do you see, just as a kind of recommendation, if you're into whiskey,
Yeah, that's a
oh,
good recommendation for folk that want to know about like Scotch whiskey.
yeah,
But the
definitely.
world one, because I obviously because I was driving to the other events, to the events out with Edinburgh, I couldn't take part in the tasting. But in the Edinburgh one, because the event was it was in walking distance, so I was like, yes, I get to take part. And I can't stop thinking about this weird whiskey that we had. It was from Finland, and
Wow.
it smelled like banoffee pie, and it tasted like bread. Sounds weird. It was such a strange sensory experience because of the juxtaposition. I was like, how can a drink do such different things?
It's amazing. It's amazing how it can. Absolutely. I don't know a load about whiskey, but I know enough to know that it really can change. And I've tried Japanese ones and does it go into like American bourbons and
Yeah,
things like that?
it goes all around the world, and it talks about rye instead of wheat. No,
Yep.
I mean, yeah, rye instead of I don't. What's the grain that they use? But barley, sorry. But it's a really it's I mean it's a big book. It's
There's
45
another
quid.
great Christmas recommendation
Oh,
for the heavy drinker in your life. So my
oh,
next one,
simple flavor.
talking
Sipping.
about heavy, this was the big State of the Nation novel for me. And
Oh, I know what you're
Andrew
gonna
Hagen,
say.
Caledonian Road. What a book
Yeah.
this is. You know, I think Postcards from Scotland's a heavy beast. This it really is. Oh, but I loved this. I'm a huge fan of Andrew Hagen. I think his writing style is always really interesting. There's always a touch of the journalistic about it. I was lucky enough to do an event at Paisley Book Festival with him, and it was the easiest event I've ever done in my life. You basically
He's a
say
talker.
he's a talker and he's an entertainer.
Yeah.
He did a reading from the book where he did the voices.
Yeah. He's a total showman.
Oh, he's great.
I mean, I love it when an author's like that though.
Absolutely.
You feel safe. You feel like you're just like, oh, I'm just going to sit back and luxuriate.
And it really is a State of the Nation novel. It's so huge and but then again so personal, and it's clearly again got a central character who is Andrew Hagen. This week's Private Eye, and you know they do the thing in the book bit where it's like you may have missed, and it's about Caledonian Road and Andrew
Oh,
Hagen.
really?
It's very funny, but yeah, it's if you haven't read it, I think it's now out in paperback. I think it's
All
now,
right, okay.
or if it's not, it's coming out soon. But yeah, so if you missed it first time round, you will not be disappointed in and read everything Andrew Hagen's
I
written.
know, I know.
I
I
think
mean, this would have been on my list if I knew it wasn't on your list. If I knew, no, if you know, wait a minute. What's the sentence I'm trying to say?
you didn't pick it because I picked it,
Aye.
which we'll get to the switch of that in a moment. But so Caledonian Road, what can I say about it? You've got all these various characters. It's like a big. And now, if you made this into a television show, you would need.
Oh, well, it is.
Oh,
I
it
think
is,
it's,
isn't it? I think it is.
yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I think it is.
I think it's the same people that did Succession. Maybe I'm wrong, but
I think,
it's a
I
big,
think,
big.
I think you might be right. And the
Yeah.
Caledonian Road is the one in London. Um, and it covers class in such a big way, and it covers politics in such an interesting way, and you'll recognize some of the characters in it, even though you're probably not supposed to. And it still goes back to the central character was brought up in, I think, Glasgow, I think he was born, but yeah, it's you get so immersed in this world. So
Kaleidoscopic.
entertaining. It's so
Yeah.
entertaining. And it's got that Andrew Hagen, he reminds me of kind of Thomas Wolfe, not just because he dresses well, but because of the way he, if you're in a company, you kind of think, yeah, he's taking what I'm saying in. This is going to appear in a book, or this is if I'm interesting enough. I think always got an eye, and he did say to me
Yeah.
that he's got all these shirts where he's written on the cuffs things that people have said, and
Oh, really?
there's a character in here that's a kind of Oxbridge educated actor who's right up himself. He says, yeah, that's based on I can't tell you who it is, but that's based on a real person. And I think there's loads of that. And I love Andrew Hagen. I love this, but I think this is possibly it's certainly his most epic novel.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I
Yeah.
think he's been writing it for about 10 years.
Yeah.
He's really taking his time with this one.
Yeah. Yeah, I really do like big baggy novels like that. Like it's not perfect. Like,
No,
sometimes you think, oh, that could have been,
and it's
but then
quite
but
rare.
then but then you think to yourself, it's like I'm gonna bring up the Beatles. I'm sorry, they're my talisman. But like it's like folk that say you could put the White Album into one instead of having it as a double album. It's like, shut up. You want all of it. You want all the
Why?
information.
You
And
want Rocky Raccoon.
I love Rocky Raccoon. But like that's the
You're
same with that.
absolutely right. It's quite rare these days that I think you get someone, and I guess Andrew Hagen has earned the right, if anyone
Yeah,
has, to go, yeah, I'm doing this my way, and I'm going to kind of put it all out there. In the same
yeah,
way that Chris Brookmyre has earned the right to write The Cracked Mirror and do
yeah,
it that way.
yeah.
Yeah,
Like, because it's funny, because when you're reading it, I think because we are now in a space and time where to try and do satire is really difficult because satire is all around us
yeah,
every day, every minute, and so there was a lot in and particularly in this more satirical parts of Caledonian Road where you're just like, I
good.
know this. I
Yeah,
know what like this isn't a new thing to say about that cultural phenomenon because it's been memeified to death. It's been in like 1,000 2-minute TikTok videos. It's been in a billion like off the cuff tweets. But then I thought, well, but that's the difference. Those TikTok videos, those tweets, those memes,
they're done.
yeah, yeah. Whereas, to put it in a novel is to sort of give it some kind of permanence and
Yeah.
give it the space it deserves for you to then properly think to yourself, well, what does that actually mean for politics? What does that actually mean for society and culture and all that kind of stuff? So like, some of the things you kind of feel, oh, well, that's like a cheap shot, that's easy pickings kind of thing. But when you put it all together in that novel with everything else that's in that novel, then it's totally right to have that in it too.
I
Uh,
think, writing it over 10 years, if you think how many things
yeah,
have changed in
I
that 10 years,
know.
you must kind of go, oh God, what, that no longer makes any sense. Or
Yeah.
we've had 10 years of that particular government. And as you say, how do you spoof
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, I
So,
know.
yeah,
So, but there is that sort of journalistic, distanced,
which I love about it.
satirical nod, but then there are also so many visceral moments where you can actually feel Andrew Hagen's properly angry about
Oh, yeah.
it.
Yeah. And I think
Like,
that's the thing about him, kind of similar to Ian Banks. There was an anger there and a
yeah,
justice that wasn't on the surface, but it's in the fiction, it's in the writing.
Mm,
And I think
yeah,
that's sometimes what people might forget. And
yeah.
of course, while writing this, he writes Mayflies.
I know. I
Wow.
know, which is like such an intimate, small, like it's a big novel because it's about, the biggest subject in the
Yeah,
world, but like but the canvas is much smaller. But this one is it's just got. Sometimes you need a book that just piles everything in,
yeah, I know. And he does the absolute full
especially when it's done with such artistry and his
style.
command of language and style. Yeah,
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 incredible style. Yeah.
yeah.
Well done, Andrew Hagen.
Well done. I hope the TV show gets a gazillion Emmys
Yeah, absolutely. I bet he does as well. I can see him
and
picking.
and BAFTAs and all of that.
So what is your, we've kind of spoiled,
I
we've
know
kind
we've
of
I
given the
know
spoiler, but
we
what's
gave
your
the
last
spoil.
five?
See, the reason why I'd miscalculated is because I don't actually have a copy of Sarah Sheridan's Secrets of Blythewood Square because I listened to it on audiobook.
Uh, it's interesting because I kind of thought when we were talking historical novels and when we were talking Glasgow novels, I was kind of thinking, oh, well, she'll bring that up then. Oh, well, she'll bring that up then. I was like, oh,
I
well,
know.
okay.
I mean, I've got my list in front of me in my notebooks, and I still.
We'll talk about because it's one of my favorite novels of the year, one of my favorite books of the year as well. What is
Yeah.
it and who's it by?
So, Secrets of Blythewood Square by Sarah Sheridan. Now, Sarah Sheridan's been writing like decent historical fiction for a fair
Oh,
wee while,
very much so.
but like particularly her last couple of books, like The Fair Botanists and this one, she's really taken off. She's like her profile has really skyrocketed in a way that's just been really lovely to see
Yeah.
actually. And I mean I even though I am an Edinburgher, I preferred Secrets of Blythewood Square to The Fair Botanist, which was a total Edinburgh novel, because it was just so entertaining. I don't know if, I mean, maybe it was the actors doing the audiobook or whatever as well, but like it was just so much fun,
Yeah.
even though, like, again, there is there's serious points to be made
Very much so. Very much.
uh in Sarah Sheridan. But what I think of when I think of Sarah Sheridan, and I think like to me, she's kind of like she's got that sort of sly subversiveness, that sort of sneaked in subversiveness, like what like in the same way that Call the Midwife is like actually one of the most subversive television shows on telly at the moment. I love it. Or like what's it? The genealogy one. Who do you think you are? Like they can tackle like both those shows tackle big controversial themes about
Yeah.
empire, about class, about the building blocks of the Victorian age and all the wrongdoings of history, but they're done in such a charming way. It's like sprinkling some sugar in with your subversion, which sometimes is the best way to get your point across, is to
Definitely.
like sneak it in the mashed tatties, like your vegetables. All the metaphors.
Are you saying cover your broccoli and mashed potatoes and get your
Yes. So it's set in Victorian Glasgow. It's very much about two excellent women. One of them
absolutely.
is called Charlotte. She's a well-to-do woman. Her father has just died, who's like a sort of very well-respected man of Glasgow. And he's died, and she's inherited his wealth. She's quite independent of mind. She doesn't want to just get married off to some guy and like, have babies and just carry on the circle of that sort of staid middle class life. So there's her, and then there's Ellery, who comes from Edinburgh but moves to Glasgow when she shows a talent for photography. She works with Oh God, the two famous the famous Scottish photographers that pioneered photography, whose names have just completely fallen out. Is it like Octavius Hill I can't even remember, but oh, that's really annoyed me. Hugh Miller. I can't. I don't even know if I'm right. Anyway, so she comes through to Glasgow to make her fortune as a photographer as well, and uh, she's obviously a woman who has come out of her slot in life as well, and they meet, and it's about the stories of both their lives and how they intersect in Glasgow, and about the social mores of the time, particularly when it comes to sex and sexuality uh, and that freedom of that expression of sensuality as well, because the Victorian era is very known as for being Prudy McPrude show, but even though they were all secretly deviants.
Is it Helen McPhee?
Helen McPhee.
Hill, Mr. Hill.
Aye, is it not Octavius Hill? Am I getting mixed up with my historical figures?
Octavius, I don't know his first name. I'm just looking at the book and they say Mr. Hill.
I'm guessing it's Octavius then.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, but like as I say, but brilliant characters, great fun, lots of like sexy shenanigans, and just characters living their best lives.
That's
And it
great.
just
It's a wonderful depiction of Glasgow. Again, a great Glasgow novel.
mm,
And Blythewood Square, very well known kind of area.
yeah.
Um, and I think the time they're in the necropolis, or at least round about that area at the cathedral, and there's lots of, again, commentary on the time about how women were treated, how women were expected to, to take a husband and all of those things. And, if they were going to receive money, that was a kind of controversial
Dowries and
thing.
shit. I mean,
Yeah, and
God.
then, and she sets up her own business, I think in St. Enoch's. I think it's down
Yeah.
that way in St. Enoch's Square. So for someone like me who lives in Glasgow and is brought up here, it's great to kind of go, oh yeah, the history of these areas, which is still not that widely written about.
No.
And I'm so pleased that we welcomed Sarah through to the city
Oh, I did an event with her last month as well, and she invited us round to her flat, which is pretty near Blythswood Square. It's certainly in the centre of town. Her
don't give it
flat is
away.
amazing. It's like I was just like, oh my God, I'm so jealous because she's moved from Edinburgh to Glasgow, and oh my God, it tells a picture of the silly prices here in Edinburgh and what you can get in Glasgow for for half the price.
So for all we sell it, Edinburgh, happy 900, but my God, you charge
Yeah.
too much in housing.
We can moan about it though. Well, I can.
Oh, yeah. So my final book is, it's the only book of poetry that was spoken about, which is interesting.
Yeah,
Because there've been some good, I mean, as you
there
always,
has.
I don't read a lot of poetry. Jenny Fagan had a new collection out, which I really
Yeah.
enjoyed. But the one I really want to talk about is Thomas Stewart's Real Boys. Absolutely beautiful. And as you know, and people won't know listening, I fairly recently lost my dad, and this absolutely breaks into, there's poetry about death of a father and grief and guilt and masculinity and all those things, and it caught me at absolutely the right time. And I just was like, yeah, this is sensational poems. And I think poetry, more than any other kind of form of writing, can do that to you.
Yeah.
It gets you and you meet it at the right time. It can mean the absolute world to you. It has for me in the past.
Hmm.
And this was definitely the case with Real Boys. There's a poem in it where he's going through his kind of dad's belongings and kind of itemizing it, and just thought, oh God, that's absolutely so true and so spot on. The whole collection is amazing, beautiful. I didn't know the work of Thomas Stewart. Well, in fact,
I think that's his first book. Yeah.
it is his debut collection. I'm just reading that in the back. And yeah, if sometimes with, again, going back to the thing we spoke about with Roger's book, how stories and how art in whatever sense can make you better understand yourself and what you're
Oh
going
yeah.
through. That's what Real Boys did for me. It kind of made me better understand my own feelings and my own thoughts. And I just love that about this book, and I love that about books and writing and all of those things in general. So,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely one of my books of the year. But you don't have to be, you know, you don't have to be feeling grief to read it. But you know, it certainly helped me. It was kind of my help book of the year. It's a beautiful collection. Thomas Stewart, Real Boys,
See,
fantastic.
I always feel like I can't really talk about because I do read poetry, but I always read bits of collections rather than whole collections. So I always feel like it would be cheating for me to talk about a poetry collection if I've not read the whole thing. But through Books from Scotland, I read lots of poems from poetry books, but I don't read the whole thing generally. So, you know, like I've read loads of great, like Tapsell Teary are a brilliant publisher of poetry, and the two books of theirs that I read this year, the first was called Sleek It, which was like contemporary poets taking on Burns, and it was brilliant. They were like the poems were both serious and funny. Like the Ode to a Butt Plug. We actually read that out in the office because it was just so funny.
There are lots of great publishers concentrating just on poetry. We've mentioned
Yeah.
before, but speculative books. I've got
Oh
one of them
yeah.
here.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, there are great if you love your poet, a bit like speculative fiction. If you love it, you know where to find it, and I hope you do. And you know, there's some amazing stuff going on. We have
Yeah.
spoken in the past about the healthy nature of spoken word, and
Yeah. And it's
we've
still
got a new macker in Peter Mackay. Is
yeah. Yeah.
that right? It is Peter
Yeah, yeah,
Mackay.
yeah, which is great because he like I think this is the first Macker we've had that writes both in English and in Scots, Gaelic, sorry,
Yeah, absolutely.
which
It's
is great. I've
amazing.
been kind of like, when is there going to be a Gaelic
Well, I've
writer?
spoken to Peter a couple of times over the years. He's a fantastic writer and also educator. You know, he's working at Stirling, not Stirling, St Andrews University as well. And so it's really good that that he's going to be perfect.
Yeah.
The next Macker.
Each Macker brings like a totally different vibe to their tenure. Like
That's great.
I
I love
yeah,
that.
yeah, totally, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so that's good.
Maid Sangu does a really good collection as well called Blood Songs this year, which I dipped into a lot. Again, Tapsell Teary. John Burnside, his last collection. Um,
Saltire winning.
yeah, yeah, that had some great poems in it as well. And Kathleen Jamie, who the Macker that's leaving, her
Yes.
is it Keeley Hawk? Brilliant stuff in there as well. All in Scott.
Was Cairn last year?
Cairn was this year too, but that was non-fiction. That was, well, it
Yeah,
was kind of, it was, yeah, that was more along the sort of sightlines type books,
yeah.
whereas the Keeley Hawk was pure poetry. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Just noticing because I've got it up there. That's why I was checking. So, so before we've nearly done, we've managed to do it.
We've done it.
We've done it, and we've done it in one fucking go. One go. Uh,
You're allowed to. You're allowed
yes, I'm
to.
allowed to. It's my podcast. I can do it.
Yeah.
But before we go, I think I'd like to mention. I thought we could mention some stuff that's coming up in the new year,
Oh yes,
and just as kind of for
2025.
people to look forward to. So, do you have
Oh
something?
yeah. My spreadsheet for 2025 is already
Yeah,
got
I thought
hundreds
that's
in
gonna.
it.
Yeah, you must share that with me. I'd like to know what's coming up. But
So what have we got coming up? I think probably the one that I'm most intrigued and looking forward to is Michael Peterson's debut novel, Muckle Flugga.
yeah,
Just because I mean we all know him as a poet. I mean he did his boyfriends as well, which was brilliant. But I really am so excited to see him as a novelist and to read that one. So that's probably the biggest one on my radar. A.L. Kennedy, she's got a new book coming out in January, like next month.
wow,
Yeah,
exciting.
that's exciting. Um, what about you? Well, I
Well, I've
think
got
of other
five I
ones.
want to kind of briefly mention. One is David F. Ross's
Oh
uh,
yeah,
The
I've got proof of
Weekenders,
that now too. Yeah,
which I have read, and it is it's wow. It kind of again jumps across time, which is really interesting. Set in Glasgow, another Glasgow novel, and yeah, it's kind of, you know, they always said about Altamont that it signaled the end of the
The
60s,
sixth.
going into the 70s. This kind of signals the end of the 60s, going into the 70s for Glasgow, I think. I think
Right,
that's a good
okay.
way of putting it. A novel which is, or a book, which is, I think it's already out, but I haven't read it yet, so I'm going to mention it, is John Gerard Fagan's Silent Riders of the Sea.
Oh, I don't know if it is out yet, but
Well,
yeah.
so
Um,
I read Fishtown was his previous.
yeah, uh-huh.
I worked with John many years ago, and I loved Fishtown, which was his kind of memoir about living and working in Japan. So I'm looking forward to that. Karen Campbell has got a new novel
Yeah,
coming out.
yeah, uh-huh. See, you've got all the proofs before me.
A young boy, a single mistake, a life changed forever.
Yeah, yeah, I love
I
Karen Campbell.
love
Yeah.
Karen Campbell. Cannot wait to read this. I actually met her at I've just noticed she's written something lovely, and I didn't know that. I met her at a gig recently. It was great to see her. Ewan Morrison
Yes, yeah, he's
is
got a new one coming out in
coming out
March.
called
March is
Forever.
actually quite a big month for releases. Yeah, so I'm wondering, I'm trying to work out how I'm going to fit it all in.
It's Leamington who are publishing that. We love
Yeah,
Leamington books.
uh-huh.
Always good.
Yeah.
And James Yoxton has got
Yes,
a
he's
book
got a new
coming out
book,
as well.
Tommy the Bruce. Yeah,
Tommy the
uh-huh.
Bruce, there it is there. So I am looking forward to reading that. I think we're going to, hopefully, fingers crossed, get James on the podcast to talk about it, which I'll be, again, writers, musicians. Oh my God, I'll just be a wreck talking to James Yoxton, you know. Huge
Has
fan
he
of
not
James.
been on the podcast before?
No, he hasn't. I've done an event with him before, but he's never been on the podcast.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah. Yeah, there's
That's
loads.
my recommendations for the coming year.
Yeah, and you
Reading.
know, I've been updating my spreadsheet this week, and as ever, all the names have completely fallen out my head.
Well, I tell you, before we go, then I do have a couple of others with crime in mind because Liam McIlvanney's got a new one
Oh
coming
yeah,
out.
he's got a new one. You see, when you say the names, it reminds me. Oh yeah, aye, that's in the
Uh,
spreadsheet.
Bless Douglas Skelton. He's kind of a
Yes.
new one of Douglas's. In fact, I think he might have two. I think he's got a Rebecca Connolly.
All right,
You know,
okay.
Denzel Myrick
Yep.
he's got his Christmas one out this year.
Yeah.
The Christmas
Is that
stocking
going to be an
numbers.
annual thing? The
Very
Christmas.
much so. And he's got one coming out next year. And he's got a new DCI Daily coming out as well.
Yes, with his new publishers. Yes.
And Doug Johnson's final space between kind
Oh,
of
yeah, uh-huh. Yeah. Oh, and talking about Andres as well, earlier on, he's got a new poetry collection coming out,
oh great. That's great.
um, called Holy Boys? No, was that not just the book you were talking about?
The movie I was talking about was Real Boys.
Oh, is it Holy Boys? It is called Holy Boys. It's anyway.
We'll find
I'm
this out.
I
Yeah.
know.
And we will
Don't
talk
trust
about
my
it. And
memory.
we may well talk about it at this time next year. Who
I
knows?
know, I know, I know.
Vikki, it's always a pleasure. We've made it to the other side. And if I
I
don't
think
see
we've
you
done
beforehand,
brilliantly.
you've done beautifully. I've really enjoyed it, as I always do. If I don't see you before, have a lovely Christmas.
You too, pal.
And we'll be back soon, probably with the best music of
Oh, well, I'll be
2024.
listening to all your best ofs.
Well, I'm pleased we've got at least one person who will be there. And we'll be back soon. Take care. So again, Vikki and I had stopped recording and packed up and finished for the evening when I realised I was so busy trying to calculate if Vikki had talked about all her books that I missed one of mine, which I had to talk about. And it is Graham McCrae Burnett's A Case of Matricide, the last in his George Gosky trilogy of books. I want to talk about it because if you don't know the trilogy, they are fantastic books. It's a shame that it's come to an end, but it has. But also, Graham is just one of Scott Hayes, and well, it's one of my favourite writers around. Always look forward to a new book from him. We had him on the podcast early in the year, and it's always great to talk to him. If you haven't listened to that, go to scotswayhay.com and you'll be able to find it there. I could have included it in our roundup of the best crime novels of the year, but I know Graham doesn't really think of it as a crime novel, and neither do I. So I wanted to speak about it on this Best Books of 2024 podcast because it deserves to be included there. So I will say cheerio once again and see you when we do our Best Music of 2024 podcast.